have you noticed some people aren't exactly jumping for joy about the election results? Trust me, I feel the temptation to laugh at these rather distraught folks, but perhaps there's something really instructive we can learn about people who want to move out of the country because of an election that didn't quite go their way.
Ellen DeGeneres is saying goodbye to the USA. Reports say the couple was driven to their decision after the election of Donald Trump.
Without psychoanalyzing all of these rather hysterical people, let's nevertheless try to understand what is making them tick. Why? So that we can be more effective in reaching these lost souls. Progressives have a lot of idols because we're made to worship. That is how we are imprinted. But idols will always break the hearts of their worshipers when their idol is under assault or is taken away. So here are a few of their idols. And interestingly, many of their idols revolve around one main idol, sex. But the first batch of idols they're non-sexual in nature. And you're going to maybe notice, wait a second, you're not talking about like the big political issue. No, because usually the big political issue is the fruit. When somebody's passionate about this, just like in biblical counseling, there's a deeper root. Let's see if we can figure out what that root is. The first idol is threatened because of the global warming issue. And that idol is their own lives. So do you catch that? The issue isn't global warming. That's the fruit of people who worship their own life. They don't want to die, and they're afraid that if we keep on using plastic and not recycling and using battery-operated cars, we're going to die. So they value their own existence so highly that the thought of an environment that could shorten their lives is terrifying to them. The next idol is government. When a socialist believes that government is their protector, it's the safest source of security. When a capitalist is elected, they get rather anxious. The next non-sexual idol is under threat because of immigration policies and wars in Ukraine and Gaza. But remember, the war, they're concerned about the war. That's the fruit. What's underneath it? I think their reputation. As we've seen, most people who protest the wars or immigration policies, they really don't know what they're talking about.
Is there something that NYU's doing?
I really don't know. I'm pretty sure do you know what NYU's doing?
About what?
About Israel. Why are we protesting here?
Palestine will be free!
I wish I was more educated.
I'm not either.
So why do these people even care about these issues? Because these issues make you a part of the in crowd. Your reputation. You know, the people on the right side of history. So when people perceive these issues are lost and their ability to be esteemed well by culture, well, then they think that they are under threat. And they're in the Kenny Loggins danger zone. But now, here are a batch of idols that all center around one issue, and it shouldn't surprise us. This is Romans 1 territory. That issue is sex. So here we go. The first sexual idol is the idol of intimacy without responsibility. The agenda of the second wave feminist movement was to separate the procreative act with procreative consequences, i.e., pregnancy. The feminists in the 60s told women, free love, daddy-o, that's the ultimate. I guess I shouldn't use the word daddy-o. Progressive women bought the lie and overrode their consciences to participate in the hookup culture. And now that free love could be limited or taken away because of the ABOR, you know what I'm trying to spell, issue, because that would get us in trouble on YouTube, they're overwrought with angst. Next idol, the idol of career. You say, what does that have to do with sex? Well, if terminating the life of your child rights are taken away, many women fear their idol of career will be robbed from them. A third sexual idol would be the idol of unnatural sex. The Pride movement claims they've got a larger agenda than just that act. But the reality is that is the fundamental right that they demand. So when they believe conservatives will somehow take away that right from them, they panic because the sexual act is an idol. You've got the idol of acceptance. People with unnatural desires want their consciences assuaged. How? By national acceptance and approval and affirmation. So when the idol of affirmation is threatened, they're threatened because they no longer feel accepted. You've also got the idol of feelings. Being led by feelings is the worldview that dominates the majority of millennials and people who are younger than millennial, Gen Z, X. For those who struggle with gender identity, an election that tells you your feelings don't make reality real is horrifying to them. Finally, this isn't exactly an idol, but people who are living in unnatural sin, they know that they are sinning and they desperately seek a cleansed conscience. An election that reminds them there are millions of people who don't affirm their sin, they feel threatened and they get angry. But the question is, even if my analysis isn't spot on, what can we learn from the hysteria that we are seeing? And I think this is where the rubber meets the road. Lesson number one, we can't be mad at someone for having misplaced beliefs. They're just confused. Their worldview is wonky. Are we shocked? Didn't we used to be just like them? Lesson two, I think we need to make a distinction between the people who perpetuate the ideas versus those who simply follow along. In other words, leaders and followers. I think the leaders, we need to be addressing them. We need to be calling out their worldview as sin. But the followers, I think they're just in a different camp. They're lost. These people are enemies of truth. These people need to be found because they are lost. In other words, they're the harvest field. So we got to be really careful that we aren't mad and seeing lost people as enemies. Leaders, yeah. Followers, no. Lesson three, and this is the one that might kind of get stuck trying to swallow it, and that is politics. It's a stumbling block. If you're not familiar with the term, Jesus used it a lot. In Matthew chapter 17, he doesn't want to be a stumbling block to the tax collector. So he says, I'm just going to pay a tax that I do not need to pay because I don't want them to get tripped up. In other words, he wants people to get saved and he doesn't want to do something that would cause somebody to stumble. And then he warns us to not be a stumbling block in Matthew 18 to others. And not even to be a stumbling block to ourselves. Romans 14 deals with stumbling blocks. 1 Corinthians 8 through 10, stumbling blocks. We have to be mindful that we don't do anything, that we don't say anything that could cause either a believer or, in this instance, an unbeliever to stumble. And politics does that. How we apply it, I recognize we're going to have different Christians implementing the stumbling block ideology differently. But if we're not aware that politics is an issue, especially these days, people are mad. They are angry. And if we as Christians are saying political things, not saying don't, I'm just saying we've got to be aware of it. I think maybe going forward, we should be mindful of that. If I, as a Christian, am going to speak out on a political issue, could this cause somebody to stumble because I'm talking politics? Because it's way more important that they become born again and not a Republican. Please, the caveats necessary. I'm not saying don't vote. I'm not saying don't be involved in politics. What I'm saying is politics, there's no question about it. It's a stumbling block. And if we aren't willing to at least consider it, then maybe, just maybe, is it possible that you have given your heart to the idol of politics? Discuss. Good morning, heathens. I'm your teacher, Mr. 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 Miss. Mr. 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 Mr.